All right, this is the design video. Um, what we're going to be doing here today with this lecture is I'm going to tell you a little bit about the assignment, and then we're going to talk about the design principles that I want you to apply to do the assignment, and then we're going to actually go over the details just a little bit more. Okay, so you really want to stick with this one. All right, so basically what we're doing with design is I'm having you guys learn the essential 4 design principles: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, and then apply them to creating something pretty simple. It's a flyer. That's what we're looking at now, is the instructions for making a flyer. And I ask you to include some content and a couple of pictures. Not all of these that are listed here, but just 2. So that's what you're going to be doing. Let's talk about what it is. Well, let me actually mention here how you're going to do it. For most of you, you probably have used Canva and you're comfortable with it, and that's what you're going to use. If you're more comfortable with something like InDesign or any other design software, really, you can use that. You could even use, like a Google program or Word or something like that if you want to, as long as you're paying attention to what the principles are and kind of, doing your best to make it adhere to those. So if you don't know what else to use for this project, for this assignment, I say go to Canva. You've got to count through your Georgia Southern, and it is really pretty intuitive. You'll get it fast. Y'all are welcome to use templates from Canva on this. That does kind of make it a little bit easier to follow some of the rules, but you can do it however you want. You can do it, totally free if you want, or you can use a template. The basis for this information is a book called The Non-Designer's Design Book by Robin Williams. And if you're interested in learning more about this stuff, I would say definitely pick it up. It's a really nice, straightforward way of understanding the principles of design, which are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. We're going to talk about each one, all right? And you're going to have to demonstrate that you understand it when you do your assignment. This is a pretty straightforward assignment. Usually people do well on it, but you have to, kind of follow directions to get all the points. So for contrast, what you're looking for is something that creates a point of interest on the page. It creates organization among elements. Contrast is what it sounds like. It's making things look different. So in a very simple example, this coffee cup is red. It stands out more because there's contrast. On the Wikipedia page that you kind of come to their home page, they use color for contrast. You can see, the boxes are different colors here, but also the font, so obviously, what's a hyperlink. We use contrast to understand content, and that's an example of how we do it. This is just a mock-up, but this is using color contrast again, but also type contrast in terms of the font. You see very different fonts, one that's more bold. You see contrast in size, all kinds of different ways of showing that things are not always all the same. If you have 2 elements that are sort of different though, but they're not really, then you have conflict and not contrast. So that's what you want to be careful of. You don't want to just have conflict. So for example, on this resume, they have taken the headings and made them all caps, which create contrast, but that's really the only thing creating contrast in this example. You can see in this next one, we've got an interesting alignment. It's all very strong here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the all caps kind of stands out more because it's bold, it's larger. They've used the biggest thing that people have a hard time with in terms of conflict versus contrast. They used a large enough font so that this title, work experience, and job position are clearly different. We know they're different things. Okay, if there were conflict, we wouldn't be sure if they were supposed to be different things. So different color, again, all kinds of different types of contrast. Some of the ways that you can make something different is think about font size, weight, and type. Then also the alignment and graphic elements on the page. So for example, with this flyer, we're gonna have all of those things change. If you look at it now, it's just kind of dull. You just don't really get excited about reading it. And it's also kind of hard to read with this very long text line across the top. So we're going to change these things: the size, the font weight, the font type, the alignment, and the graphic elements. The graphic elements, that little line is one, but the ones that you see in the revised version are different. They're actually, kind of more artistic. This would be a graphic element, this little thing in the background. So with this. But you can see how they chose a font that is really contrasting to the other use of font in the flyer. Okay, repetition. Repetition, I think, is pretty straightforward. It is used to unify and add visual interest. So it's the reason why we have, these are all white. These are all this color. These are all this color. We have these squigglies that repeat. We have these arrows that repeat. It's basically you're putting things in the design that help people understand that all this stuff goes together. It belongs together. You might see it in like an office or a company portfolio of items that they're going to all look like they go together. That's what repetition is. You want to repeat some element of the design throughout. So that might be the font. Obviously, if we're creating anything with any amount of text, there's going to be some repetition of font. Lines, use of lines and graphic elements, bullets, color, and design elements. So you're going to repeat some aspect of those probably in any design throughout. Something that looks like this, where these little lines occur, those are graphic elements. So those are being repeated to show you that this is all part of the same design, right? The use of the color purple is repeated. Fonts are repeated. So it all looks like it goes together. Repetition gives the reader the feeling someone's in charge because repetition is obviously a thoughtful design decision. So basically you're saying we're doing things intentionally with repetition. It unifies and strengthens a piece by tying together separate parts. Alignment. Most of what we see is left aligned text. That's most of what we have in our encounter with anything online or books or anything. But right aligned text can be interesting. If you're creating something that you don't have to communicate a lot of information, it can be a good way to kind of catch people off guard. So you can see how this flyer did that, or the advertisement did that. This one's not as obvious, but if you look on the left here, this is actually center alignment. If you can see kind of this middle is right here. It's center aligned. Oops, sorry. This one is left aligned. This one looks a lot better. So you can see how that design choice here, the left alignment, made this easier to look at. Justified text, another option for alignment, can be really hard to read because it can create gaps, but if you have a lot of text, it can be useful. So you might, you'd see justified text in like a magazine or a newspaper or something like that, a lot of websites, when you want to create order, you might use justified text. Not for the assignment y'all are going to do today, probably. All right, here's a good one. This one's important. Avoid center alignment, okay? Center alignment, we use it a lot. We use it a lot and it has become a crutch. It's a little bit weak in terms of design. It doesn't convey a message. It just says, I got time to put this on the page in the middle and I'm going to be done with it. So I want you guys, when you do your design for this assignment, I'm not going to say you can't use any center alignment, but I want you to avoid it as much as possible. If you use a ton of it, especially if most of your thing is center aligned, then I will take off points. So avoid center alignment. It is bad design, generally. Now there are times that you can use it, and that's things like formal situations, like this wedding invite. Center alignment, it doesn't need to be easy to read, right? If you look at this example, there's a kind of understanding of how clear this information is based on how it's aligned, right? Like this, they were, getting creative and having some kind of interesting alignment here. But when you look at it, it's hard to think about reading it. This is much cleaner and you can scan and skim and get in there, right? So there's a visual unity that's created with good alignment. The other thing we talk about with alignment is not just, well, I'll talk about it in a second. Yeah, here on this page. It's going to make things more readable if you have good alignment. It's going to make it clear that you've thought about what belongs where. So for example, we're in this example where it says never to rake or to never rake, right? This is being told what to do by, what magazine did I pull this out of? Anyway, it could be aligned differently, right? They could align this over here. They could have the ellipses begin over here, or they could do it over here. But this is very clean. Notice how this section at the bottom is also aligned left. It's all very clean. So you get the relationship between items. These things are related. These things are related. There's only so many alignments on the page, okay? This is important. Find strong lines. So when you look at a page of text especially, look at how many lines there are. There's a line here that goes all the way down. There's one. Oh, I did it again. I clicked. There's two along the middle, and then there's three, right? But sometimes poor alignment, there'll be something else over here, and then you'll have 4 and 5 and 6. If you get into more than 3 or 4 alignments, you probably have too many, okay? Proximity. Proximity is just grouping. It is just putting things in groups, putting things together that go together. Items that are intellectually connected are visually connected. If you think of them together, then you put them together. So here's a real simple example, a business card with the name, good front and center, but then you don't really know where to go next. And you don't really know how these things relate to each other, right? But if you put it together in a way that makes more sense and pulls the pieces of the address that go together, the contact information that logically goes together, it's much easier to understand. I like this example. I actually just scanned this out of the book because I wanted to show you the little bit of difference that we can make with a good alignment. So this is something you're going to group together as correspondences, and then this is something you're going to group together. But if you don't have any space between the two groups, it looks like they're the same group, right? Only the bold here is helping. So just a little bit of space between things that are not connected will give you strong alignment. So giving things space when they are not connected, right? I had another example. I didn't leave it on here, but it was a menu where they had put and I'm sure you guys have run into this at a restaurant before, where they've put like the prices like 500 feet away from the actual name of the item. So you're looking at it and you can't tell what goes with what because there's bad proximity. They're not grouped together. Here's another example of just a layout of a page that has proximity being used. So they've taken this content and put it all in kind of one section and this in another because that's what goes together, right? All right, I know I've kind of hit you over the head with that one. Okay, so that is crap. We just talked about contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity for several minutes there. You guys hopefully got some good ideas that are flowing in terms of you're going to do some interesting design. The assignment itself is using, obviously, these 4 design principles and to create a flyer for the Statesboro Azalea Festival, which I totally made up. It's not a real thing. 8.5 by 11 inches is a standard page size, so that's what size I want it to be, and I want you to submit it as a PDF. I've given you some images, and I want you to choose 2 of those, but you can add others of your own if you want, or you can use more of the ones that are offered. The text is here. Let's see, what do I need to tell you about this? Nothing at all in particular, except that you can see that it's not a ton of information. So think about how, what makes sense to people, what needs to be the biggest, what needs to be obvious, and then put some contrast in there, make the big things big. And then the third part, or I guess the part 2 of this, is that what I want you to do once you create the design and you're ready to submit it, in the comment section where you put in your assignment, I want you to just real briefly, you don't have to get into it, please don't get ChatGPT involved, just briefly explain how you used contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. So I gave this example here that I used contrasting size and font, I repeated bullet points, I used a strong left alignment, I had 1 other alignment, so that's basically me saying, hey, I only used 2 total alignments, that's good. Activities are grouped together, creating proximity. So basically, you're just telling me what I told you about these different things of design and how you use them, okay? Pretty simple. The grade on this, what I've got here is basically like a rubric. You got 20 points coming at you, and I want you to just demonstrate each of these principles, and under each I've mentioned something kind of specific. So with contrast, you're avoiding conflict, you're organizing elements clearly. With repetition, you're organizing the information, you're creating visual interest. With alignment, you're creating the relationships on the page and you're avoiding center alignment. You're demonstrating and identifying proximity, so showing, where you put things together that go together, where you created space to show things go together. I also look just if you have any like really atrocious readability issues, if you put some color on top of another color that you just can't read, or your text goes completely off the page. I might take a couple points for that, but for the most part, this is where the points come from. I want to see y'all do well on this because on the final, although some of y'all will probably do, most of people kind of do on average about what they've been doing in the class when it comes to the final. Not a lot of people gain points with the final. So don't necessarily expect that to happen, but this you should be able to do well on. Just take your time, don't rush through it, and give it a little bit of attention and you'll be fine. All right, I sound like a preschool teacher today for some reason. I don't know what that's about. I hope y'all are doing well. We'll see you later.